Hi, welcome back to an installment of Get to Know Your Clergy. I'm Bob Johnston. I am the Associate for Contemporary Worship at St. Michael and All Angels. And this time is for me to let you know who I am a little bit. And the way I'd like to do that is tell you first just kind of what I do at the church. And then I'd like to give you my faith history as a way of letting you know more about who I am. So right now, as I said, I'm the Associate for Contemporary Worship, but I also help with pub theology, which we do every June on Mondays, and we just finished that up. And the other thing I do is I help with the Alpha course, which we usually start in January. So all that keeps my plate pretty full. We have a good time doing that. I've been at St. Michael's now for about 5 years, and I've really enjoyed being there, and I'll say more about that in just a bit. When I tell my whole faith journey, oh, wait a minute, I better stop and tell you where I am. You're probably sitting there wondering. I thought it might be fun for this installment to do it from Bryce Canyon, Utah, where we happen to be. So I've got my film crew with me today, and you can see it's right at sunset at Bryce Canyon. So we'll do it, and I'm wearing the glasses because the sun is right in my eyes, but we'll see how this goes for a bit. So I thought a way to get to know me that would be really good is just to tell you my faith journey, and it all starts with my grandparents. When I was a little boy, my twin brother and I used to go down to visit my grandparents, and every night before we go to bed, they would stop and teach us to pray. And when we went back home, I continued doing that. The little rote memory prayers that they taught us, I continued to do. And over time of doing that each summer and then bringing it back, I finally got to a place where I sort of developed a relationship with God. And about the time I was in junior high was a significant moment because it was a moment when I realized that there was somebody there and that the relationship really sort of became dynamic. And I had this feeling and sense that God was there and hearing me, and I started reading scripture, felt like I could hear things that he was saying to me, and it became a dynamic relationship that way. And then a little bit after that, my parents went to a retreat weekend at the Episcopal Church, and they had their faith really came alive. And because of that, they carried that into the family. So again, also a reminder of how important I think the faith of parents can be. After that, my twin brother and I went to a retreat. And right before that, I've always been sort of a serious planner. And I was really thinking about, what am I gonna do with my life? What does God want me to do? And I'd gone to an acolyte festival where somebody had talked about being called into ordained ministry and how they had been there. And it just started me thinking about it and praying about it. And so I prayed about it leading up to this retreat. And funny enough, I was praying about, am I going into ministry or am I going to go fly? And I prayed about it, went to that retreat, and kind of walked out of there with a real sense of what God was doing in my life. And sort of the next big passage that I would pick up on from there was when I was 17 in the summer between my junior and senior year, I went as an exchange student to South America, to Colombia. And it was a big moment for me because I had grown up in a very affluent family. My dad was a heart surgeon, and I really had been sheltered and protected that way. And I went down there, and it was the first time that I had ever seen, at least where we went, entire neighborhoods of people living in cardboard boxes. I saw this little girl one day crying out of hunger. I saw some moral depravity that I had never seen before, and it really just turned my whole faith upside down. And I got into what I know is a classic problem now, as I've read and learned about things, but it's basically these 4 points that people get into of saying, look, God's all powerful, God is all loving, God is all knowing, and this stuff exists. And trying to figure out, how do you hold all 4 of those things together? I couldn't do it at the time. And so things started to unravel. And I think if you had asked me at the time what I was, I probably would have said I'm a deist. I think God kind of has wound up the world and walked away, and all this stuff is going on. I couldn't see him at work anywhere, and that's kind of where it was. Meanwhile, right towards the end of my time down there, I wanted to tell you about the ongoing piece of this crisis, because I was super involved in my high school. I was the class president, all this kind of stuff. And then I get this phone call from my dad saying that he's taken a new job in Houston and we're gonna move my senior year. So I'm coming back in this turmoil with no support system, no youth group, no big network of friends, not even mentor teachers, all of that gone. happily, I had my twin brother who we made the move together. And so that whole year was a struggle. And I eventually got to a place where I wanted to get the peace I'd had before back in my heart. And I wanted to get back to where I was with faith. And I was praying and I was doing stuff or doing a little bit of reading, and nothing seemed to work. I did that the entire year. Finally went off to college, and it was about that time I was like, it's never going to come back. Threw up my hands, and then just like a rush, it all came back. And it was like a gift. And you read in Corinthians about the gift of faith. I feel like God just gave it to me at that moment. And granted, I did read a ton of books at that point, after that, on suffering and trying to reconcile all these things, but just the gift of faith was given. And after that, I'll tell you what happened with sort of the ordained ministry thing. Let me back up to say one more story from high school. When I was in high school, I met with my rector and told him, I think God may be calling me to ordained ministry. And my rector at the time, who now with hindsight, knowing what I know, was probably going through a little small chapter of burnout, he said to me, run from it. If you can get away from it, then you're not called, which is kind of weird advice, but that's what he said. And so I kind of went on doing all this stuff. And then when I got to college and got my faith back and all this stuff, I was super involved in Canterbury, which is like the Episcopal ministry at college, and worked in that ministry. And I met with the chaplain one day and told him, I think I might be called. And he says, I see that in you, but I think you'd be a better priest if you go have a vocation first. So I was an engineering student, and I kept going down that path. And it was about that time that my twin brother was going to med school, and my girlfriend was going to med school, and all these people were doing this stuff. And I realized I wanted to do more than do calculations and some of the engineering stuff, which I loved, but I wanted to do more than that. And I met this friend who said to me, you should think about patent law. And because you'll get to write, you'll get to be with people all day, and you'll get to use your science and all these other things. And so I went to law school and studied law school. After that was over, I went and got a job with one of the downtown law firms. Did that for a number of years. And then I went in-house with one of our clients. And it was during that time I was doing a lot of travel that I really realized that God was still calling me. And so I started meeting with the bishop and talking to the rector, meeting with the bishop, doing all that. And I eventually went to, the sun is finally going down, so I'm going to pull my glasses off. I went to seminary at SMU and did that. And that's when one of the most significant things happened to me, because we ended up doing it. They require you to do an internship for a year. And I was asked, like, what's the place you would love to do it more than anywhere else? And I prayed about it and thought about it. And I was like, well, I'd love to go to this one church that's in London, this big Anglican church in London. So I wrote to them and asked them about an intern. And they said, well, we've never had one. Tell us about it. And I did. And they accepted me. And it took a year to get all the arrangements made for us to do this. And we went over there. And that year was the most amazing year because, and one of the reasons I wanted to go there is because in London, only about 4% of the population goes to church on a given Sunday, but this church is packed with over 2,000 on a Sunday. And it is the church where the Alpha Course comes out of, and it's just an amazing Anglican church. And so it was so good for me to watch how they did ministry and how they welcomed new people into the church and how they were passionate about God's Spirit moving and working today. So it was really the best part of seminary came from that. And then to boot, we found out a month before we went that my wife was pregnant. So my twin boys were born in London. And so that was just a crazy exciting year. And I came back and joined the church that I'd been at. And I was tasked with starting a contemporary offering there. And I spent basically the next 10 years doing that, and got to grow it up, that service up to be close to 500 people on a Sunday. And then when we parted ways with that, it was great timing because about that time I got a call from some of the leaders at St. Michael's who said, we'd love to hear about some of the stuff you've been through and the growth and this and that. And I met with them and talked for like an hour, just talking about all the things of the last 10 years. And when I was done, the senior warden at the time says, and what are you doing now? And I said, well, I'm praying about what's next. I'm talking to God about that. And And he said, well, would you consider praying about being with us? I was like, yeah. And I should tell you, I wasn't in a particular rush, because one of the details I didn't mention that's complicated, I won't go into the reasons why this came about, but along the way, I became what's called a bivocational priest, which means I have a day job that I do as well as a church job. So I have these two jobs that I manage to do together. My tent making, they sometimes call it, my day job is that I'm an intellectual property attorney. I deal with trademarks and patents and help people get those. And then I pour myself into doing all my church work, and both of them help me in different ways. One of the things I love about it is the work I do in the law field helps me, I think, give a voice that maybe sometimes people will hear that they might not otherwise hear, and helps me understand what other people kind of go through in the trenches. And so I think it's a win to have at least some weird folks like me in the church that do these two things. So I wasn't in a big rush, but when this came and when St. Michael's talked to me, I began to pray about it. I felt that it was a great time to do, and it was risky joining during an interim time, but I felt like it was God's call, and indeed it was great. When Chris arrived, we hit it off. And I got to say now, just for a moment before we kind of go on, that it's great to be there now, because it's exciting to be at a place that is growing. It's exciting to be at a place that wants to bless the people around us and bless the world. It's exciting to be at a place where people want to talk about Jesus and the difference he makes in people's lives. It's exciting to be in a place that's growing. And one of the things I carried away from my time in London was how the vicar there was always talking about you should always be in a place in ministry where you have joy in ministry. And you guys may not get to always see it behind the scenes, but the clergy have a lot of fun. Chris has put together a team of clergy that really enjoy each other, and there's a lot of joy in ministry. And I think that's just a really fun thing. I think that's the way that it ought to be. So I think that God really has blessed us in bringing everybody together, and I love what I'm doing and getting to serve in that place. So that's a quick whirlwind of my spiritual journey leading me up to where I am, getting to serve with you at St. Michael's. So now picking up on what I watched Greg Pickens do the other day, I'm going to do some rapid fire questions best as I can remember them. And before I do, though, I'm going to make sure that my film crew gets a good look at the final bits of sunset in Bryce Canyon. And I'll tell you a story while that's happening, because even the name of this place, I think, sort of speaks in a way to faith. You can see God's beauty and majesty in this place. But Bryce, for whom this place is named, was an Irishman who came to the United States, and he converted, actually became a Mormon. But part of the call the church gave him as a Mormon was that they wanted him to be a homesteader. So his job was to go to places and set up communities and make homesteads. He did that 12 times. So that was part of his mission in life. But one of his stops was here. And as part of that, this canyon got his name. So when they named the national park, I think in the 1930s or something like that, it got his name. So it's kind of its own faith of story. He's here visiting and talking about that place. So anyway, so fast questions. Favorite movie, kind of fun, always picks me up. I enjoy watching it. Probably the original Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. That's probably my favorite one. Favorite book, Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. Love that book. It's thick, but it's worth every page. Really good book. Favorite band, probably Tears for Fears. I know that dates me. That's probably my favorite band. I can listen to them all the time. Favorite songs, my second favorite band is U2, and I have to say probably my favorite two songs, Beautiful Day. Love that song because it really gets into the complication about how we live life with two tracks going. One, we face these things in life that aren't fun, but even on a bad day, there's always beauty. And that song always reminds me of that, and I just love that. And then I've also really in the last couple of years gotten into one of the songs off Achtung Baby, to the End of the World, which is a love song between Judas and Jesus. And that song, for some reason, just really conveys God's love to me every time I hear it. So that's probably my two favorite songs. Let's see, other favorite things. First, I should say something about my family. It's not really a rapid fire question, but I didn't say it. I've got twin boys that are 16, and they're in high school at Bishop Lynch. Weird thing about me, you already got, if you've been listening, I'm an identical twin. I have my identical twin has identical twins, and I've got fraternal twins. We're like a twin convention. It's kind of a unique thing. What am I leaving out, guys? Favorite passage of Scripture? I would say I'd probably point to two. Both of them are from Philippians, and so if you didn't see the Rector's Bible study from the summer, you ought to go pick that up. But Philippians 1:21 is probably my motto verse. That's one where St. Paul has this passage where he says, to live is Christ and to die is gain. And to me, that passage is living life in a way where you experience Christ everywhere you do. The work you're about is for Christ. The mission's about Christ. All of this. And then when you die, you know it's better. So to live is Christ, to die is gain. The second passage is from the 4th chapter. And it's where it says, don't be anxious about anything, but by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace which passes all understanding will abide in your heart and will guide you. So I think it's just a great passage always to hold on to. There's so many good ones like that. So anyway, that's quick get to know me. So glad you tuned in, and I'm so glad that God has called us to be in ministry together as we worship and as we engage the world in His name. Blessings.